Ruth chapter 1 and the passage we read earlier. At long last, some good news. Words said like that can feel weighty. They can have a huge backstory. It can be a person seeking employment that's finally got a job, or maybe even after hundreds of applications got an interview, which can be difficult today. Or maybe getting the all clear and finally signed off from hospital after a lengthy course of treatment that's been concluded. Or a war or conflict somewhere in the world that's gone on for years finally coming to an end. And the violence being over. Here was one of those moments in this region of southern Israel and into what today we call Jordan. The famine or food scarcity was over. We don't know how long it had gone on for, but it was a period of years. And life had been exceedingly difficult. Ruth 1:6 reminds us Naomi had heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. The issue that had caused Elimelech to take his family to Moab, that big decision. That time, that problem had been resolved. Yet it was a bittersweet time. That decade or more had passed, but Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion were dead. The security, the support that Naomi had gone. The future she visualized for her children had gone. Almost certainly they'd gone to Moab to do what was best for their family. But now the good news has come. And who is the good news to be for? Her reason of going back was probably fatalistic. She was not going back with hope for the future. Coming to ourselves, how do you view your situation now? How do you view your future? Is it fatalistically, what will be, will be? Or do you view it with hope because God goes with you into that future? These are big, big calls. Sometimes we have more enthusiasm for life and circumstances than other times. There are times when we can feel overwhelmed, that life's getting too much and we're just hanging on by our fingernails just to keep going one day at a time. Where are you today? From what we've read of this story so far, it's a tough, tough life situation. There's nothing so far that would lead us to think that it's a story that 3,200 years later, we'd be looking at it in another country at another time. Things are going to change because someone has that faith commitment to God. Someone who's an unlikely person. It's a person who's a Moabite. A person who's young. A person who's powerless. Who would have been viewed as of little importance in that culture of that day. But this is the person who is at the center of the story. Who testifies to the goodness of God. That God delights in ordinary people trusting him and seeing how he works in and through them. The song that we sing, that we're going to sing later. I love you, Lord, oh, your mercy never failed me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you've been faithful. All my life you've been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Can you echo those words of testimony in your life. So back to the story. In verses 6 to 14, they're standing at the crossroads. There's an issue that cannot be avoided. The key word in this section and this chapter is return. In the English translation, obviously different similar words are used, so it's not just repetitive, but it's that emphasis on returning. The decision that has to be made. There's three people here with a choice as to how they will live their future. It's one of those places where the decisions they make will affect the rest of their lives. And we all have these moments when you're choosing subjects for school, choosing whether to go to university or college or work, about relationships, about family matters, about work decisions, about locations where we live, and so much more. There are big moments that we know will impact for a long time or forever. What decision, what choice would they make? They didn't have many possessions, so it wasn't like the removals that in the Western world where we have the big vehicle and loads of stuff that takes forever to put into cardboard boxes. The little amount of stuff they had setting off. Maybe it was at the end of a day's walk. They're exhausted, they're resting, and they're reflecting. We notice here's the first reference to the Lord in the story. I believe that's significant. It's so easy, even as believers, to go through life making the best we can of decisions, but not involving the Lord as we should with the choices we have to make. The Lord having a place in our lives, but not always having the place in our lives as central. The good thing is Naomi's bringing God into the conversation. And when God's been brought into our lives and our decision making, it enables us to make better choices. In the end, the prayers they make will be fulfilled far more than they ever imagined. But there's already a hint that God's loving and more merciful than we deserve. Naomi's got a long way to go to get to the place of confidence in God's goodness and grace despite the tough times of life. She has a lot of big issues to work through that's going to take some years. God doesn't wait for us to get everything sorted. He wants to journey with us in our grief, in our confusion, in our pain, in our anger, in our whatever it may be, to get us that place of trust in him, to have that confidence in his goodness. It starts with that first step. It starts with that decision to trust him, our gracious and loving God. It's the same with salvation. If you're here and have not committed your life to Jesus Christ, to take that step today. Our eternal destiny depends on that, on the day we stand before the Lord. Naomi didn't have everything worked out. She'll make a decision to go back. She returned. So the decision that has to be made, in verses 10 to 14, she resigned herself to an uncertain future. She said, "The Lord's hand has turned against me." One of the things in the Bible, compared to the religious texts of the other major religions, is the honesty in admitting the flaws in the characters in the story. They may be the people God used, but they're not perfect people. There's Abraham. At the time of famine, he went down to Egypt, and the mess he got himself into, and the problems he created for his wife, and his son Isaac would do the same for his wife Rebekah. What about Jacob, the father of the nation, the grandson who deceived his blind father? And there's a pattern. God can use us despite our past mistakes. God doesn't just use perfect people. Thank God for that. because only Jesus would qualify on that count. But that's really, really important, because sometimes we can have difficulty forgiving ourselves for past mistakes. But we can close past chapters because of the grace of God and begin afresh in going forward with him. I think Elimelech and Naomi made a wrong choice to go to Moab. But we can't change the past. Whatever's happened in our past, good or bad or in between, it's only the future that we can affect. Did the wrong choices she'd made in the past influence the advice she gives to Orpah and Ruth? I think that's very possible. So we need to ask ourselves, when we're making choices, what factors are involved in influencing the choices we make? Because sometimes those influences cannot always be good. Naomi's resigning herself to an uncertain future. What about Orpah? She's cutting her losses and giving up. Now, at first, she's going to go with Naomi and has to be persuaded to go back. Naomi's quite correct, humanly speaking. The likelihood, as an immigrant coming into Bethlehem, it's going to be very hard to find a husband and to be accepted culturally in that place. That's just the reality of life at the time, and sadly in our world today. But it's a bleaker picture than most probably would have been the case because of God's grace. Sadly, the blessing that Orpah might have had in Bethlehem, she missed out on. She'd been advised not to put the God of Israel first. And that was tragic. She put the human circumstances first. Whether it's issues of work or family, to put God first is really, really important. When we put God first, the other things fit into place. Not always the way we would like them to be, but in the way that God would have us. And there's Ruth, who acknowledges the difficulties and yet refuses to quit. There's much weeping and tears, and Orpah's gone home. And incredibly, Naomi is saying, well, Ruth, go after Orpah and do the same thing. But nothing will persuade her. She doesn't know about Boaz and the future. That's still something that's a way ahead. But Ruth will say those remarkable words of loyalty and commitment to Naomi. Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. The faith of this young woman puts Naomi to shame. Sometimes those who are newer to faith can be a challenge to those of us who've lived as Christians for longer, who have lost that enthusiasm we had for the Lord and need to reclaim it. But that's the same pattern down the centuries. Remember, Jesus said to a Jewish crowd with respect to a centurion, I've not even seen such faith in Israel. This man's got more faith in his trust in God, as a challenge to them. Sometimes we need that challenge from people who are new to faith to challenge us. But have you put your faith in Jesus yet? Have you begun that journey? If not, why not do that today? But then taking the decisive step in verses 15 to 22. There's a picture of resignation. The two women eventually arrive in Bethlehem. And the women say, is this Naomi? She's looking older and frailer. Don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara. The Almighty's made my life bitter, very bitter. I went away full and the Lord's brought me back empty. Life, for almost everyone, has very difficult moments. Times of pain, times of struggle, times of heartache and disappointments. But it's not the circumstances, but how we react to them that determines their impact on us long term. Sometimes people can have the most extraordinary responses to the situation. A secular example from World War II is this gentleman that should appear on the screen, Douglas Bader. He's lost his legs, but he didn't think that's the end of my flying in the Royal Air Force. He waited to get artificial legs and then back into the plane. Extraordinary man of courage in World War II. He didn't say what I can't do, but what I can, and was back flying and doing a remarkable job. And then Joni Erickson. This is just a picture taken a few years ago. Young woman who had life before her, all looking so good, that had that awful accident and became a quadriplegic. And yet, God used her more to reach other people through those tough circumstances of life and her talks and her books than she could ever have reached had life gone as she'd planned. We can live. We can't necessarily change our life circumstances, but how we view them and how we trust God in them can make all the difference indeed. Naomi had to overcome Mara, feeling bitter about the past, and be released from that into the freedom God had for her to know his blessing and his goodness. Let's hear a person of resolution, of Ruth, determined that she would make things work in Bethlehem and do what it took to help Naomi resettle in her own land. Someone from the most disadvantaged of circumstances coming into Bethlehem. And yet she believed that God could work for good in her life and that of Naomi. Your God will be my God. She'd come to recognize that the living God was greater than the God she'd grown up with in Moab. She had no idea how God would work things out, but trusted that he could and he would. Do you need to recommit your trust in God or reclaim your confidence in the goodness of God? Will you trust him to take care of your future or some situation you're struggling with today? I hope and pray that each one of us can grasp the goodness of God and have that confidence in him for the future. Amen. I'm going to hand over.